To fight or not to fight, we talked to our chief political writer about the possibility of Canada sending a combat mission to Iraq. Also, saving time in Parliament, one MP shares his thoughts on how politics can be done differently. I'm Madeleine White. Welcome to Globe Now. Military action against Islamic State is gaining international momentum. And last week, Stephen Harper received a request from the United States to increase Canada's contribution in the airstrikes against the terrorist group. The Prime Minister was coy in answering reporters on whether he would accept this request, but vowed that any combat mission would need approval by the House of Commons. So does this mean Canada will be sending troops to Iraq? Campbell Clark joins us now to share his insights. Welcome, Campbell.
Good morning.
So before we get into the likelihood of Canada backing a mission against the Islamic State, can you briefly explain what this contribution might look like?
Yeah, it's most likely to be more or less a half dozen CF-18 fighter jets. That's actually sort of the standard Canadian contribution to war zones. You know, the same as in Kosovo, the same as in Libya. And they would join airstrikes probably in Iraq, which are already underway. The United States and France and Britain are already conducting airstrikes, mainly the Americans. We already have some special forces troops who are advising Iraqi troops on the ground there. So it's not clear whether they would stay or come back. Possibly they would stay.
Now, there's been a lot of concern, though, that the Canadian military can't actually afford to be putting in any sort of commitment. Is that the case given the budget cuts?
I think the question is really whether the planes are ready and up to snuff because there have been budget cuts. I mean, we do have the CF-18 fighters. The question is whether we have a big enough fleet that are, maintained and ready to go. We already have some in Eastern Europe that were deployed there essentially because of concerns about Russia. And I believe there's some out on a military exercise in the Pacific. And there's just a limited fleet. Of course, they have to still do their job in Canada with NORAD and so on. So the question is how many are tuned. The military insists they will have whatever planes they need to go. But, there are limits. And if you have 18 abroad and you need so many at home, they're in a fleet of 60 or so jets that, that creates a squeeze.
Now onto the debate in Parliament. Based on what you're hearing in Ottawa, how would a vote go?
It looks like, first of all, it does look like the Conservatives want to put forward a plan to join combat. And by combat, I mean the airstrikes, not troops on the ground. It seems clear the NDP will oppose it as it stands now. And the Liberals have been waffling. The Liberals have said both that they're against airstrikes and they don't know if they will support a motion for airstrikes. So it seems very unclear at the moment which way the Liberals will go.
Now, I mean, each of the parties has something to gain in terms of the stance they take on this, given that it's an election year. Specifically for Stephen Harper, what does he have to gain in terms of pushing this issue? Yeah,
well, look, this does normally is the sort of issue that jives with Stephen Harper's base. He has a conservative base. They tend to want to take part in allied military actions. They tend to be less reluctant than other Canadians. So that would normally suit him. Also, as a leader, he generally wants to portray the image of leadership, somebody who takes strong action on the world stage. The only thing is nowadays there's quite a bit of reluctance, after Afghanistan, for Brits and Americans after Iraq, and there's a little bit of mistrust. Well, there's quite a bit of mistrust among Canadians about their leaders and about whether they get into these things too easily without looking ahead to how the mission might end. And they are concerned about mission creep, and they're concerned about whether their leaders are open and honest with them. So he will have to deal with that all the way along. And if he doesn't, there could be a hangover later, because it's not usually entering the mission that's difficult for politicians. It's as it moves on down the road.
Interesting. Thank you so much for joining us, Campbell.
Thank you.
Well, we want to hear from you. Do you support increasing Canada's military operation against Islamic State? You can tweet us your thoughts. We're at Globe Now. And now we turn from a debate on military action to the restructuring of how debates happen in Ottawa. MPs spend a lot of time sitting in the House of Commons, questioning, arguing, and voting. But can their work be done more efficiently? Ted Hsu is the Member of Parliament for Kingston and the Islands, and he thinks it can.
I have some ideas for how to make Parliament more time efficient that I think would help everybody. One of the things that we could do is get rid of Friday sittings of the House of Commons. There are no votes, there are no committee meetings, and we only sit for half a day. I think it would be very easy to move those 4 hours that the House of Commons sits that day, add them to the other 4 days of the week, and allow Friday, Saturday, Sunday as a time when MPs could return to their home ridings, listen and talk to their constituents, and be with their families and take care of their personal lives as well. Well, my second idea to save time is electronic voting. A typical vote that comes up in the middle of the day will take about almost 45 minutes. In addition, there are other votes on bills and motions that take place during the day, or quite often they're all pushed to the end of the day. And that every vote takes a long time, and sometimes you have multiple amendments for different pieces of legislation, and it could take a long time to do these votes. I think that if we had some sort of system of electronic voting, we could save a lot of time. I think people need to have a better idea of what the job of Member of Parliament is. More than just a general community leader who attends events and performs ceremonies. I think if we got away from performing ceremonies, it would save a lot of time and make it easier to do what you really need to do, keeping the government accountable, reviewing legislation, advocating for my constituents as a Member of Parliament.
That's it for today's show. I'm Madeleine White. Thanks for watching.